Hello, Bruvs. We're back with Trousered, Apes, Sick Literature and a Sick Society by Duncan Williams. We continue with Chapter 7, I believe it is. Instinctive Morality. The question that cannot remain unasked, however, is why does Jari's decision seem more consistent, more logical than Camus? In other words, is there an honest way out of the impasse, or must Ivan Karamazov's reaction to the absence of a god, everything is permitted, continue to dominate and eventually destroy man's aspirations and reduce humanity to the ethics of the Nazi concentration camps? If this question cannot be satisfactorily answered, then nothing but social lethargy and dwindling pockets of residual orthodox religion and religious morality separate us from lapsing back into jungle law based upon the will to power. Let us see if we can attempt at least to answer the question positively without the sacrifice of intellectual honesty. It is safe to assume that when the creature destined to become man struggled from the ooze and slime onto dry land, it was obeying some deep instinctive drive. Because of the vagueness and consequent confusion surrounding the term instinctive, one might substitute the expression primordial affirmative for this drive. It was this primordial affirmative, the unthinking, unreasoning will to exist, that enabled this ancestral creature to survive and adapt to the varying situations which confronted it during the succeeding millions of years until finally it evolved into a creature recognizable as man. During the whole of this long-drawn evolutionary process, the power of conceptual thought did not exist. The primordial affirmative was sufficiently potent to ensure survival. The possession of conceptual ability is, in fact, a very recent acquisition in man's history. Although this is not to suggest that it is unnatural, anti-instinctive, artificial, or that it works against the primordial affirmative. On the contrary, it is a perfectly natural refinement and extension of such affirmative or instinctive faculty, shaping, guiding, and preserving life. And if we pause for a moment, we shall see that it could not possibly be otherwise. After all, if this ancestral creature, obeying solely the will to survive following the dictates of the primordial affirmative, developed voluntarily a method of conceptual thought, then such method could not possibly be alien to it, could not be anything other than a natural outgrowth springing from the creature's own consciousness. One of the greatest fallacies of Western thought has been that the instinctive and the rational faculties are mutually hostile and exclusive. Plato conceived them as dichotomous as body and mind, and subsequent philosophy and theology have wrangled over the rival claims of these two phenomena, which, Freud notwithstanding, are in reality complementary. Our error lies in not realizing which problems to assign to the rational faculty and which to the instinctive. In ordinary everyday living, we experience no difficulty with this problem. In a restaurant, a person examines the bill, possibly checks it to ensure that it is correct, calculates a reasonable tip to leave, and tenders his money. All this he has rightly assigned to his rational faculties, which have been trained to perform such tasks efficiently. Simultaneously, he is performing a number of other functions, breathing, hearing, blinking, and so forth, automatically and without exercising the discriminating volitional faculty. Unfortunately, in the realm of abstract speculative thought, we are not so competent in what we render to the rational and what to the instinctive. As examples, one might cite questions as to the purpose of life, speculation regarding the existence of God, or the existence of right and wrong. To treat the last of these first, if any reader can honestly feel that the gas ovens at Buchenwald were neither right nor wrong, then he is a true relativist. If, on the other hand, he regards such things as innately evil, then, despite the modishness of contemporary ethical relativism, he is still a member of the human race, even if he cannot rationally explain why he feels such things to be evil. Similarly, questions as to the purpose of life involving the innate will to survive, the primordial affirmative, cannot be rationally considered or answered. Much the same is true of theological belief and controversy. A rational argument between an atheist and a believer is an essay in futility because both are addressing their finite, rational faculties to a problem outside the scope of such faculties. The existence of God can neither be proved nor disproved on rational grounds, and belief involves not so much the sacrifice of the intellect, which I am suggesting is incompetent in this matter, but rather the substitution of instinct. The universe and this world may or may not be absurd. Contemporary science appears to indicate a random and therefore absurd cosmos. But when one considers the exploded scientific theories of even a few decades ago, it is surely an unwarranted presumption, an example of crass temporal provincialism, to assume that the current scientific view is final and immutable. Faced with such an enigma, it is worth pausing before jettisoning not only the traditional concept of a deity, but also the whole moral and ethical fabric, together with the 2,000 years of human wisdom woven into our Judeo-Christian tradition. Particularly since there appears to be no viable alternative system of belief to command a general allegiance. Not only does rationalism have its limitations, but what we are in danger of denying or ignoring today is that the same is true of our instincts. They were perhaps all sufficient for prehistoric man, but for his contemporary counterpart amid the complexities of the modern world, to attempt to live solely by obeying instincts or the dictates of passion is to court disaster and descend to the level of the trousered ape. Contemporary music, art, literature, and drama, with their emphasis upon the primitive and the unregenerate, may be seen as a reaction to the ultra-rationalistic, computerized society envisioned by such anti-utopian writers as Aldous Huxley and Orwell. But the extremism of such reaction makes it repugnant to the true humanist who wants man neither to become a machine nor to lapse into barbarism. The 18th century possibly overemphasized the rational, reacting in what is regarded as an inevitable swing of the pendulum. The Romantics overemphasized the instinctive and the intuitive. What is needed today is a fusion of emotion and intellect. Otherwise, we may find ourselves at the mercy of those like Arthur Koestler, who in The Ghost in the Machine suggests the need for some kind of brain pill to allow the thinking part of the brain to assert constant control over the emotional, that is. Man has progressed because of the obstacles which he has had to overcome. If life were to come to resemble what geologists refer to as a peneplain, a flat, featureless landscape, then the consequent inertia and ennui would undoubtedly result in entropy. Here, then, is a major problem of the great crisis of the present, and it can be expressed as follows. Can man continue to exist without forfeiting much of what he now regards as human nature? Moreover, if his desires and passions are controlled by some external and almost inevitably authoritarian means, is he doomed to slow decay or extermination? Neither of these prospects is alluring, and in the face of such a choice, the sensitive mind might well sink into the quietism of despair. It may be recalled that in the fourth book of Gulliver's Travels, Gulliver was faced with the apparent choice of emulating the hymns, symbols of abstract dehumanized reason, or degenerating into the bestial state epitomized by the Yahoos. Both alternatives were equally obnoxious to one such as Swift, who was brought up in the classical humanist tradition, and Gulliver, infatuated with the horses and neighing, instead of speaking, is mercilessly satirized for his failure to espouse a via media and continued to be a man. The classical and Christian traditions have both emphasized pride and self love as the chief source of man's sin, whilst indicating that they are but exaggerations of the constructive virtues of dignity and self respect. In other words, even a virtue ceases to be such if it is carried to excess. Today, we are confronted with excess on all sides, excessive worship of technology and its dubious fruits, excessive passions and violence in our literature, on the stage, and in our streets. The voice of moderation, reason, and restraint recedes into almost total silence. The best appear to lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Writing of the time prior to the Second World War, when the Nazis had seized power, and the remainder of Europe seemed powerless to resist their philosophy of conquest, Camus wrote, "Everywhere philosophies of instinct were dominant, and along with them the spurious romanticism that prefers feeling to understanding as if the two could be separated. Romanticism, with its emphasis upon supra-individualism, inevitably results in relativism, since if all people follow their impulses, a wide disparity of both judgments and actions must emerge. Although such relativism may appeal to the youthful, it palls on the adult mind, which tires of the ensuing moral and social chaos. Moreover, relativism, which in theory at least disregards social, aesthetic, cultural, and ethical norms, is obviously only a step away from the nihilism Camus saw as one of the crimes of logic. Let us attempt now to pull certain strands together. Spengler saw romanticism as a nostalgic look to the past, to childhood, a step on the way to wishing oneself back in the darkness of proto-mysticism, in the womb of the mother in the grave. Today's ultra-romantic avant-garde would seem, in their death-oriented hopelessness, to lend credence to Spengler's theory. On the other hand, a purely rational society, reasoning all purpose out of life, cannot logically deny that Jari's deliberate suicide was consistent with its own cosmic view. In other words, exclusive and excessive emotionalism or exclusive and excessive rationalism lead to the same nihilistic terminus. A synthesis of emotionalism and rationalism would seem, therefore, to be the sole hope remaining to man. Here, then, is the task which confronts us in the arts and in life. To extol beauty, dignity, and grandeur, both in man and nature, is not an escape from realism or from what is natural. There is nothing fundamentally more realistic or more natural about a public urinal or a kitchen sink or a paranoid schizophrenic than there is about a tranquil lawn or a cultivated household or a balanced mind. All exist in this world, and a writer who concentrates exclusively upon the sordid and repellent aspects of life, implying that these are all, is as guilty of distortion as the authors of mawkishly sentimental novelettes. Writing of man, Robert Louis Stevenson made the following observations in Pulvis et Umbra. Poor soul, here for so little, cast among so many hardships, filled with so many desires, so incommensurate and so inconsistent, savagely surrounded, savagely descended, irredeemably condemned to prey upon his fellow lives. Who would have blamed him had he been at peace with his destiny and a being merely barbarous? And we look and behold him instead, filled with imperfect virtues, infinitely childish, often admirably valiant, often touchingly kind, sitting down amidst his momentary life to debate of right and wrong and the attributes of the deity, rising up to do battle for an egg or for an idea. To touch the heart of his mystery, we find in him one thought, strange to the point of lunacy, the thought of duty, the thought of something owing to himself, to his neighbor, to his God, an idea of decency, to which he would rise if it were possible, a limit of shame below which, if it be possible, he will not stoop. Of all earth's meteors, here at least is the most strange and consoling, that this ennobled lemur, this hair-crowned bubble of the dust, this inheritor of a few years in sorrow, should yet deny himself his rare delights and add to his frequent pains and live for an idea. Those who today stress man's animalism, who see him as merely a walking bag of seawater, are denying or ignoring that, unlike other animals, as Stevenson points out, man has striven for a moral order, has bridled his own lusts and appetites, has tried, however pitifully and inadequately, to achieve an idea, has created a Tao, which, as Cluckone has pointed out, embraces moral codes that extend beyond what are necessary for mere survival. If such codes fulfill an innate instinctive need, then no amount of intellectual or rational casuistry or sophistry can deny them, since they are susceptible to debate by the intellectual or rational faculties. If particular virtues have been extolled, certain objects have commanded aesthetic allegiance, and certain ways of life have been recognized as innately good by civilized man for thousands of years, it can only be because such virtues, objects, and ways of life have satisfied an imperative need in him. To argue the need intellectually or rationally is as absurd as to indulge in rational debate about one's preference for a particular color or one's choice of a wife. If we accept such things as innate, as an outgrowth of the primordial affirmative, then the intellect is freed to concentrate upon those matters that are its rightful preserve. The problem of world population, the question whether we wish to inhabit a world in which man has a place, or whether we will allow ourselves to be dominated and eventually outlawed from the natural world by our technocratic skills. The question whether we want to remain free men or to be transformed into semi-slaves or worse of the state, these and allied problems are within the scope of our intellectual capacities, and it is to these increasingly urgent problems that we should address our intellects. Some will, of course, see this hope as futile and sentimental wishful thinking. They will point to Buchenwald and Hiroshima as examples of the essential depravity of man and the consequent dishonesty of any view which presents him in another light. Such fatalism, however, ignores the fact that the concentration camps and the bomb aroused widespread horror in the minds of civilized men throughout the world. Complete hopelessness would be permissible only if there had been a total absence of such reaction. If all mankind had docilely and meekly submitted to the historical expediency of such atrocities and had sought facile relief in degrading justification of the events, that they did not do so is an indication that man still has within him, however battered and bruised, an idea of what he should be and what human life should be like. And I believe that's the end of this chapter. Tis. All right, brother, I believe we're down to the last chapter and then afterword or a prologue. Or is it epilogue? The hell's an epilogue? And then the bibliography. Yeah. Trousered Apes. Goodbye, bruv. Goodbye.